Variable data print, completely different. We had been dealing with packaging and die lines and bleed generation. Now it's about, I don't know, industrial print, a zillion of different pages, invoices, whatsoever, individualized print objects. And there, one of the most common issues is performance. Yeah? So when you print with just one imprint per page, you need to have pages that are quickly being prepared, ripped for the print process to keep up with the speed of the printing machine. And that has a lot to do with XObjects. XObject is an internal thing to PDF. So let me just briefly recap on what a form XObject is. And form XObject is something that encapsulates PDF content. So it is regular, it's somewhat like a page, but it's not a page, it's an encapsulation of a page if you want. And then you could use that object. You could use this feature of a form XObject, for instance, if you place something onto a page that is PDF. So you have some page and places onto another page. For instance, when you're imposing stuff, then you would usually use a form XObject. So you would encapsulate the page that is being imposed into a form XObject and then place that form XObject on the sheet. You also need form XObjects for transparency. If you want to group objects to each other, we talked about knockout, transparency groups. So you can and you have to use form XObjects for grouping objects, and you use them, and that is where we are talking about here, for variable data print. So all the objects, all the content that is being reused on pages or on one page when you impose, for instance, a label that has some changes in it but is otherwise the same, then you would just use the content that is repeated as part of a form XObject. Or I should better say, you should do so. It's not always the time. Once in a while you have issues. So a form XObject is important for the RIP because only if reused content is in a form XObject, then it can be cached in the RIP, so that the RIP would for each page only have to process the dynamic content, the content that is changing, and could keep all the objects that are all the content that is reused in its memory, in the cache. Yeah? And that means if you have performance issues with particular PDF files, it would be good to analyze the structure, the internal form XObject structure that is present in the PDF file. And that is something we want to make possible in pdfToolbox. So it's a somewhat complex issue that we want to address here, and we want to provide you with a tool that allows you to analyze the form XObject structure in the PDF file. And it's always difficult to get used to a foreign computer, a Belgium thing with a foreign keyboard, but I can do. Here I've got my PDF file, and it just has 10 pages. It's part of a sample suite for pdfVT, so it is really variable data. It has been created for variable data production. I have modified it a bit in order to work for my presentation here. But it has, as you can see, some variable content here on each page, but it also has lots of static content. And if we enter a proper library here, which is pdfToolbox 15, we don't need that even. What we need actually is the Layer Explorer. So we go to Explore Layers. That was there in pdfToolbox 14 already. What is new is you have a new entry here, enumerate X objects. So this is only visible if your PDF file doesn't have layers already. And what it does, it just opens the switchboard. And if your PDF would have layers already, you would just go straight there. So what you want to do is you want to enumerate X objects onto layers. And that you can do in the switchboard here. So it has now created layers in this PDF file. And these layers correspond to the X objects that are in this PDF file. And in addition, it has created some red rectangles here on the page that are also part of a layer, and that indicate from X object. So we've got, 7 layers here, and each layer tells me in its name a little bit about the form X object that it corresponds to. So first it has an index number, then it just says form X for form X object. Then it tells you on how many pages the form X object that it corresponds to is used. So in my 10-page PDF file, this appears to be present on all 10 pages. And since form X objects can have a hierarchy, so one form X object can encapsulate another form X object, it also tells me how many children this one has. And if I then switch this layer off, I can see what was behind. So the dynamic content is still there, but it appears that there is some hidden content. So the same label is there again, but not used at all. So there is content that is actually not used. The designer might have forgotten to remove it, and this will obviously slow down my printing process. It's not a big deal in this example. It's just a couple of vector objects, so it's not a real issue. However, it has an issue. Yeah. So and that is only possible because we are using this visualization. And the red rectangles here indicate the edges of my form X objects, so I can switch them all off. They are just there in order to help me to really see where my X objects start and where they end. And if I, for instance, switch all the other objects off here, I can see that this object that is in the background corresponds to this red rectangle here. So how can I now remove this additional content that I actually don't need? There's a trick. So it would be cumbersome for pdfToolbox. I could now remove so let's say these are the layers that I don't need. So these are all hidden. They are not used. They don't change anything on the page. So I could now start to remove them. But that would mean for pdfToolbox that it would have to go through all pages and to remove all references to the X object. So that would take some time and is also error prone. There is much smarter way to get away with it, to remove them. I just switch them off and save visibility. Yeah, and then it tells me here, the current layer visibility will be saved as initial visibility. Objects that are not visible now will be invisible when the PDF is opened and will usually not be printed. And that is important. So a RIP would usually ignore everything that is initially invisible, meaning that is on a layer that has a parameter is initially invisible. Yeah, and if I now just save the PDF file to my results folder, why not? Then I'm sure that I can now send it to the RIP, and the RIP will ignore all the content that I don't want to be printed, and I should have switched these red rectangles off as well, because I don't want them to be printed either. Yeah. Yeah, and I encourage you to play with it. Let us know if you are in variable data print, whether there is room for improvements. This really is an analysis tool, and it can be a production tool. So I have seen files where, especially if there is transparency involved, and you have such additional X objects that are completely hidden and don't have any effect on the finally printed page, but still slow down the RIP process dramatically. And if I would then just switch them to being initially invisible, it runs smoothly. So that it definitely can cure problematic files. It requires some investigation though, admittedly. So we've seen that we can do that interactively in pdfToolbox desktop. If you want to use this feature somewhere else, you can still use it. There is a quick fix that just does the same. So there is a quick fix, distribute form X objects on layers, and that would create you a PDF file out of your original that actually has the same layer structure that I've just shown you. Okay. The other feature is, I go on, flatten form X objects. That should also be demonstrated. Briefly, we have flatten form X objects. So I'm using the same file here. We have seen it doesn't have any layers, but it has X objects. And if I now flatten it, and go to my layer explorer, explore layers, enumerate X objects, it will only create that one layer for the red rectangles. So I have flattened the X objects. That also sometimes is useful in order to streamline the whole PDF file. So now, of course, I've gotten a bigger PDF file because now all the repeating content is part of the main content stream for each page. That was a demo. Important to understand is, as I told you, form X objects are also required for transparency. So if my original PDF file would have transparency, the engine would create new form X object wherever needed, just in order to make sure that transparent objects will still appear the same as before. Finally, for variable data, there is dpart metadata. And let me recap just briefly. Dpart metadata is hierarchical metadata associated to pages. It's a hierarchical structure, and pdfToolbox 14 already supports dpart metadata. It is possible to extract metadata into JSON and to import JSON structures back into PDF files. Yeah. Dpart metadata is used in pdfVT files to separate objects from each other. And we will see that in a second. pdfToolbox 15 now has a feature to find key value pairs in that metadata. Yeah, so you can say specified dpart dpm property uses specified value. That is my new check. And I could then say the metadata key is, in this case, record value seasons, and the value is summer. And then pdfToolbox will give you all pages where that is the case. And again, I have a demo here. I don't want to save the result. I want a demo file. And yeah, you can use the depart button over here. It will show you the metadata that is here. You have, I don't know, what is it, 10 records, 100 pages. Yeah, and each record is associated with some metadata here. So that is not new. That was possible in pdfToolbox 14. What I now have, it's possible to check for that metadata. And as I've said, I'm using a key here, and that is actually a structure. In the object record values, there is a variable or a field seasons, and I want to see all pages where the value in that field is summer. And you see I have 100 pages here, and if I run it in test mode, it will show me that this is the case for 20 pages actually. It's page 51 and up to page 70. I have, I believe, 10 records here, so probably each record has 10 pages, and that means I have this value in 2 of my records. So I can find those pages, but even more so, I could use that as a fix-up, as a filter in a fix-up. So here I'm using it the other way around. So I want to remove all pages where that is not the case. So I simply use the fix-up, remove pages, and as a filter, I'm using the check that I have just shown you, but the opposite of that check. So it will find me all pages where the value is not summer. And if I now run it here, it should create a 20-page PDF file indeed. And it now, this new one has only the pages 51 through 70 from my original file. I could as well have, I don't know, converted these pages to gray or whatever. So I can use this filter in all checks that in all fix-ups that pdfToolbox has for me. So finally, and last thing I want to mention, PDF page-based output intents, just because it also has to do with pages. You can have page-based output intents in PDF files, and pdfToolbox allows you to take them, to use them. So for instance, you can do a color conversion. I don't want to demo it because of the time, but you can convert pages to the output intent, and if the output intent is different, then you can convert them into different color spaces. And that also is important for variable data, because quite often you have products, PDF files where more than just one product is present. You may have the cover and the body of a book, and then you can convert them into different output intents. Thank you very much. It's now for David to introduce you into JavaScript related stuff.
Cool, JavaScript. I didn't know that. Let's see. Let me get rid of this very nice file, and I need many libraries. So, and then I also want this. So, last part of this pdfToolbox 15 introduction. Traditionally, there always have to be some things that have to do with JavaScript, so this year is no different. Let's start with something relatively small, rotation in JavaScript. Actually, what happens is that in PDF files, as most of you I think will know, but you need to understand that to figure out the rest of what I'm going to say. So as most of you know, there is something like page level metadata that can mean many things, but what I'm referring to specifically is something called user units, which allows you to just put a number in the page dictionary in a PDF, and then when it is there, the intention is that the content of that page will be printed scaled by that number. So if the user unit is 2 and I have a PDF file that says I am 1 meter by 1 meter, then the print will be 2 meter by 2 meter. If the user unit is 0.5, it's exactly the opposite, and it will be scaled down by 2. So that is one thing that was already supported in JavaScript, and I'll show you how it was supported, because it is the same as for what we're introducing here in pdfToolbox 15. There is another key that you can specify in a page dictionary, and that is a rotate key. And that is not specific to PDF, perhaps. A JPEG, for example, has the same feature. What it allows you to do is it allows you to say rotate, for example, 90 or 180 or 270. And then when it is printed, when the document is printed, all of the content needs to be rotated with that amount. And the advantage, of course, is that these are just numbers that are specified in the page dictionary. You don't have to change the page content itself in order to do so. So when you rotate pages in a document, you can do so very quickly by just putting that number in the page dictionary. The way that pdfToolbox supports this, or at least the user unit in pdfToolbox 14, is by providing you with two properties of a page object. So when you look at the JavaScript, there is something called app. I've explained this a lot of times already. I hear myself saying it. There is an app object that represents the whole application. Then you have a doc object that represents the current document, and that has a pages array. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at page number 1, which for developers is called 0. And then you have two properties in there, one called trimbox and the other one called effective trimbox. Effective trimbox is the one that takes into account user units up to pdfToolbox 14, and now in pdfToolbox 15, it also takes into account the rotation key. So what does that mean? I can show that quite easily. So if we go here, and now I also need proper file for that. So I have a rotated file here. So this will have this rotation key in the page dictionary. And then if I look at page rotation factors, and I'm not actually going to run it. I'm going to just open it up and show you what is here, and then I'll show you the console result. So what I'm doing here, it looks like a lot of lines, but it's actually very, very simple. What I'm doing is I'm calculating the trimbox width and height. The width is the right-hand side minus the left-hand side, and the height is top minus bottom. So I'm calculating the width and the height of the trimbox and of the effective trimbox. And then I do the same for the media box. And then there are some console info statements that just write all of this to console. And so when I say show evaluation results, and I perhaps, can I make this a little bit bigger? Yes. And there you go. So what it shows me is that the trimbox property for this document is 210 by 297. The effective trimbox is 297 by 210. So this is width times height is what I'm showing here. So this says it is a portrait document, but the effective trimbox correctly states that it is a landscape document. And so the same for the media box. If you need the rotated document, so if you need information about the document where the user unit has been taken into account and where this rotate key is taken into account, then use the effective trim box, effective bleed box, and so on. There are properties for all of these boxes that you can use. So small thing, but if you need this, it can be very useful. Okay. That was one to get us started. And then I want to come back to barcodes. We talked about barcodes in the previous session, the fact that there is detection of the barcode rotation property and also the quiet zone. You can now, and this is very similar in a way, you can now get all of the results of a barcode, so all of the properties of the barcode, very easily in the result object in JavaScript. So if you run a check that, and I'm not going to show this because I want to show other things that are way more cool, but if you run a check regarding barcodes or matrix codes, then you will get the properties of the barcode in the result object. There's a small point that needs to be added to that, and that is if you want to see the quiet zone results, then you need to have also in your check a property for quiet zone. It takes some time to calculate these things, and so they are only calculated when your check really needs them. Okay, let's move on to this one. This is something that was introduced, I believe, in pdfToolbox 14, but I'm not, it's 14 this time. I'm really going to make a quiz about that. So there was something that was introduced in pdfToolbox 14, and that is condition, if you want, so something that you can use in a pre-flight check, and it's called create a hit or not, and it lets you artificially create a pre-flight check, and so a pre-flight hit. And that is kind of important because it means that, especially in a process plan, well, sometimes when you branch documents in a process plan and you do a bunch of complex calculations, at some point you need to make sure that there is a pre-flight error that is generated. And so this is ideally suited to let you do that. In pdfToolbox 15, there is, so before pdfToolbox 15 there was one, and you see an example of that here. And in pdfToolbox 15 there are two new ones, but I'm going to show you, and then we can still look at this if we want to. So what I want, I'm going to show you the pdfToolbox 14 stuff, and then I'm going to show you the pdfToolbox 15 things. So I have a process plan here, and when I say run, it says no problems found, which is interesting. And when I say run, it says, oh, problem found, which is also interesting. So same process plan, but it gives two different results. And what it says is document name contains debug. You can see that that is correct. The document name actually does contain debug. So how does that work? Again, this is something that was possible already in pdfToolbox 14. I have this create a hit or not. It has it lets me specify whether I want to create a hit or not. And then it also lets me specify the trigger value, which is what you see in the results window. And so the interesting bit is really the JavaScript that determines whether I'm going to create a hit or not. And this is about as simple as you can get things. So what it says is app.doc.document file name, which is the file name of the currently processed document, includes debug. And that will result in true if the word debug can be found in the file name, and it returns false if that word cannot be found. Yeah, and so what that means in my check is that if that returns true, there is a hit that is created. And what it returns is a pre-flight hit with a trigger value determined by another little script. And the trigger value in this case is just document name and then app.doc document file name. So the name of the current document, and we have not looked at that, but if I say tests and I look at the check and I say details and then trigger values. So first level is that create a hit or not returned true. So it did create a hit. And then I have the value that I also specified, document name, and then the name of the document that contains the word debug. So that is something that you could do in pdfToolbox 14. I think most people probably have not used this yet, but you can use it as part of a process plan to determine whether the process plan will need to return an error or not. And so what is new in pdfToolbox 15 is that the problem with what we had is that the hit was always a document level hit. So you get one hit for the complete document. And that is a pre-flight error, so it's fine. It creates a hit and you can use it logically. But it's annoying that, for example, you can't specify which pages were hit or which areas on the page even caused a hit. And so in pdfToolbox 15, that is exactly what you can do. And I'm going to show you an example of the one that creates a hit for pages. I have a document that has a whole number of pages here. No penguins, I'm sorry. And I have another process plan, and we'll look at what it does. So there is a check in there. This check uses one of the new conditions, create a hit or not for pages. And if you search for create a hit or not in pdfToolbox 15, remember, you can download the pre-release version to do this. When you search for create a hit or not, you'll find 3 conditions now. Create a hit or not, and then this create a hit or not for pages, and then one for page regions as well. And so what it allows me to do is to specify if there is a hit that is going to be created or not. And then it also lets me specify for which page number or page numbers that hit is going to be created. And that is interesting. I can do a page descriptor here, so I can do a comma-separated list with pages, or I could do something like 1-10 or whatever. And what did I do? I solved a very important problem in graphic arts. Namely, we all know that if you have a page that is where the page number is a prime number, it doesn't work very well. So this detects pages that where the page number is a prime number, and has a little function for that that works. Don't take it from me. It was actually ChatGPT that wrote it for me because I was too lazy, and that works fine. And so what it does is it looks at the number of pages in the document, and then it runs over all of the pages in the document, checks whether that page is a prime or not. And then if it's prime, it puts it into my result array. And then at the very end, that result array is formatted as a string and with commas in between. So you would get something like 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully not that, because those are not all prime numbers. So what happens when you run that? Well, I get a hit because my document actually does contain prime numbers. But now, instead of a document level hit, I get a page level hit. And so for each page where I determined that this is a prime number, I now get a hit in the result window. And you see that correctly, it says page 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so on. Okay? If you were expecting 1 in there, then you don't need PDF Toolbox training, but math training, I can also help with that. Or you can ask ChatGPT. The numbers are correct, and it returns you a hit for each of these things. So that is interesting because now in the process plan, if I do a calculation for numbers that have or pages that have a particular problem, I gave an example yesterday. We have this EPM, enhanced print mode. The process plan for enhanced print mode looks at, is the document ready for enhanced print mode or not? And to do that, it looks at every page and then determines whether that page is okay or not. Now, that process plan just returned yes or no because there was no other thing that we could do. But with this, you could actually return the specific pages that caused that document not to be okay for EPM. That is a very nice use case for that. And so the other thing in PDF Toolbox 15 is, and let me now go back to this presentation just quickly. So the other thing is you can do that not only for pages where you get a page level hit, but you can also do it for page areas where you can even specify the area on the page where a problem occurred. And exactly the same way as what I showed here. Good. Last topic, I believe. Allow me to fix a problem that many of you didn't know you had, but you do. So when I run this is a desktop issue, right? When I run a profile or a process plan in PDF Toolbox desktop and that contains variables, then you get something like this. So my process plan in this case, and I will show you what it does in a second. My process plan defines 4 very logical variables: trim box shape, trim box width, trim box height, and trim box units. And when I run that, this is what I get because it is sorted alphabetically and it is about as confusing as you can possibly get it. Now, technically, you could already fix this because you can make a template for this ask at runtime dialog. You can specify that in the process plan or in the profile, and that template has the capability not just to change the look and feel, but also, for example, change the order in which things are shown. In practice, modifying this template was not a small task. And so I don't believe that most of you will have even attempted to do that. And in PDF Toolbox 15, I think there is something in there that is easy enough to actually use. So let me do a bit of a demo, and I am going to be writing some JavaScript here. Hopefully that goes the right way the first time, but we will see that. So again, not a penguin. There must be something wrong with me. And this is my first attempt. So this is a standard pre-flight profile, and when I run this, I get exactly what I showed before. So they're in kind of random order. They're not in random order, but they could just as well be. And I will immediately show you what that does. Why do I get the variables? Because there is a little script in this profile, and when I look at that script, as I said, it contains 4 variables, and I've just defined these variables in the script. So I have something called trim box shape, which can be rectangle, square, oval, and circle. You can see they have a label and a value. And then I ask for trim box width and height, and I ask for trim box unit, and that can be one of what you would expect: millimeter, centimeter, point, and inch. Cool. So 4 variables. and they show up in the wrong order. So how do you fix that? And then I could say, well, there is now an easier way to do templates, but that would be, I think we've already tried that once, and it was not a big success. So there is an easier way now, and I can do it just from JavaScript. And to begin, I'm going to say insert JavaScript objects. And what you can see here is that there is now something called app.context.dialog.order. That sounds really nice. So, and it says array of variable keys, and then the first key will show up first. That is very promising, so we're just going to insert that. And what it told me is that this is an array, so we need to add an array. And what it also told me is that I can put the keys of variables in there in a specific order, and then that should be the order that they are asked in. So I have 4 of these. I'm going to make my life easy and just make room for 4 variables. And then what is the logical order? I think that if we have the shape selection first, that would be nice. And then I probably have a width and a height. And then lastly, I have a unit. I hope you agree with me that this would be a reasonably nice order to have things in. So let me say okay here, and then test. And now it shows me the shape of the label, then width and height, and then the unit. And I do believe you still have to write some JavaScript. I understand that, but I do believe that this should be simple enough to work for most of you without any problem, right? Doesn't stop there. There is something else that I can do that is really nice. And it is also, I can also tell you what it is by looking at these variables. So the shape of my label is a rectangle, and a rectangle has a width and a height. What if I say that the shape is a square? It's kind of weird that I can enter the width and the height of a square. Kind of the defining property of a square is that these two things are the same. Otherwise, it's a rectangle. And the same for a circle. So that is kind of unfortunate. I would like to disable or maybe hide the height depending on the type of shape that I've selected. So let's see if we can get that done. And in order to figure that out, I'm going to go back to editing my JavaScript. We have this order thing that we just added, so that is nice. Let's see what our bag of tricks can do more. We were in app.context.dialog.order, and now I also have something called dialog.state, object to allow to disable or hide variables. Again, that sounds really interesting. It's a little bit more complex than what I have before. You will see that. So this is an object. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the variable that I want to potentially disable. Let's do disable. And I'm going to put that in there again as an object. So I want to do something to the variable called trimbox height. That's why I put that in that state object. And now the question is, what do I want to do with it? Well, I want to, really nice that I get all these error messages. I want to, and I'm going to now heat. See, I already have it. So I want another object. Normally, I would look at the documentation at this point. And now the question is, when do you want to disable it? And so in order to disable it, I want to look at one of the other variables. Specifically, I want to look at trimbox shape on box. Trimbox shape, and I want to disable my height variable if the trimbox shape is a square. That's what we started with. And watch out, the label is written square, but the value is square. That's just how I have set it up. Now, if I was very careful and smart, I think I was not smart enough. I knew that was going to happen. That's why I have the example there so I can cheat. Close this, we don't need that. So what do I do differently? I actually don't think that I do anything differently. Look at that. So there, I was so close. Now we have to see whether it works. So this is a rectangle. The rectangle shows both the width and height. That is what we would expect. So what if I go to square? Well, then the other one gets disabled. Yeah. Of course, I just specified square. So if I go to circle, it is enabled again. And I can show you how to fix that part as well. And that is actually quite simple. And then we're going to do something else, and then we're done. So how do I make sure that it is not only square, but also circle? Well, instead of specifying one value, I can specify two values. I can say circle. Yeah? And when we do that now, we should have rectangle, square, and it's disabled, oval, and it's enabled, circle, and it's disabled. So nice. I'm still not happy. Because of course, from a UI or UX point of view, it would be much nicer if it wasn't just disabled in this case. There are cases where it would be good to disable it. But in this case, it would actually be nicer if it wasn't disable if, but let's just take a wild guess. Hide if. And I'll leave everything else the same. And then we say tests. And now when I go to square, it actually nicely hides the height parameter. Now, be very careful. I am modifying the dialog box. After that, I will have to have some JavaScript that figures out that if there is a square, it should only use the width because that's the only value that the user entered. And if it's a rectangle, there is a width and height variable that should be used. So the logic is not taken care of automatically for you. That you still have to do yourself. But at least there is an easy way to do a couple of simple things with this dialog without you having to make an HTML template that is very complex. So in the JavaScript, you can either specify the order and or you can disable certain elements and you can hide or show certain elements. Yeah. So that can be quite interesting. There is one last thing that I will just show you so that you know that it exists. And that is with all of these things that we had here. So what I can also do is I have this app.context.dialog. We used order and we used state. This one can also be interesting. .show. If you if you set that to true, then the dialog is shown, which is normal behavior. If you set it to false, then this dialog is not shown. And especially, I think, if you're doing testing and debugging of a complex process plan, where you just want to use the default values and that is fine for your testing, you could set this to false and then never see the dialog box and do testing. And once you're ready, you just delete that from there. Or you do something like what I showed yesterday, where you look at the document file name, and if it contains debug or some other thing that you know, some unique value, then you always hide the dialog box, and in all other cases, you assume it's production and you show it. So you have some new tools in your toolbox. Again, if you are working with variables and you want to use that in pdfToolbox desktop, then this gives you the opportunity to well, modify this, customize it a little bit without having to go as far as making a complete template. I hope that is useful, but I actually think that it will be. I am not surprised. And so that's it, I believe.